Hey everybody, good morning. It's day 94 of Spiritual Healthcare. Welcome. It is good to see everybody, and we've got a lovely day here in Edmonton. I hope you guys are having a great day too. Lots to talk about today, as well as two really good announcements coming up. So I am excited about that, and so it's going to be really cool. So I hope you guys are prepared to stay up late tonight because got a great announcement for this evening, and a really cool announcement for tomorrow's spiritual healthcare as well. So we've got lots to do. I'm stoked to get into this. And today we're going to broach into a couple of different subjects. Not only are we going to talk about people who charge and when it's appropriate to charge for things like paranormal research and investigations, as well as continuing our discussion about narcissists and our own ownership in bad situations like that. So we've got lots to. We're gonna cover a lot today. Good morning, Patricia, and to Lori, and to Jay, and nice to see you guys. Nice to see Marge. Nice to see you. It's good to see everyone. Good morning to Kaz. Nice to see you. It's good to see everybody this morning. We've, as I say, lots to cover. Two announcements this morning. And like I say, we're going to chat about, as I say, when it's appropriate to charge and not to charge, and when it's, and all of that kind of thing in the world of the paranormal, as well as the extension of our topic on how to deal with narcissistic people, as well as negative entities, and how to not make ourselves a target, because both interlink to each other. It's really interesting. Marge says I look stunning. Oh, thank you so much. It's the sunburn. It's the new fashion, I think. It's the new fashion. It's so pretty. Look at that. No, it's awful. But I can't wear I'm like slowly beginning to be able to wear sleeves. At least I put sleeves on now, so that's a plus. That started yesterday, so progress. So as I say, lots to cover today. I hope you guys are having an amazing morning. It is really nice and warm and sunny here. I hope you guys are having the same really, really good weather. One of the announcements that I wanted to let you guys know about today, which I'll start off with right away, because I was going to tell you guys yesterday and then I completely forgot. So the Parapsychological Association, and this is pretty cool, has a bulletin that basically comes out every number of months, and it's called Mindfield. And Mindfield is probably one of the best just resources, spots for articles, incredible research, like leading edge, cutting edge stuff from laboratories all over the world. Mindfield and the Parapsychological Association has released 16 of their issues for free online. So I'm going to post them to the Entity Seeker Facebook page so that you guys can get a hold of them. They are absolutely incredible. Like, this stuff will blow your mind. So I'm really stoked to be able to put them up there so that everybody can start reading them. They're really fascinating, so I highly recommend that you guys at least have the link and just start to go through them, because they're really, really incredible. So all of those, Mindfield, 16 issues of them are for free. You can download them, go through them, and whatnot. And then if you want, you can always join the Parapsychological Association for all the upcoming issues and stuff like that. But it's super cool. It's super cool that they've done that. I think it's really neat. So as I say, I will post the link to that. The other announcement that I had today is that tonight on Coast to Coast AM, I will be on with the great Mr. George Norrie, and we're going to be talking about teaching the living and spiritual healthcare, and going through the processes. We're going to be delving into sort of the depths of the psychology of hauntings, and all sorts of things like that. It's going to be really cool. Coast to Coast AM is on super late. So if you guys can't tune in, that's okay. They always have the shows posted later. But I'm really excited to be on there. It's a great show. And they have such quirky things. And they're going to be, the first half of the show, they're going to be talking about biblical prophecy and all sorts of just wild stuff like that. And then I'm going to be on the second half of the show, and we're going to chat about everything from hauntings to, as I say, teaching the living, to spiritual healthcare, to all that stuff. So it's going to be really fun. So Coast to Coast AM, guys, tonight. I literally have to get up at 12:30 because my interview starts at like 1 in the morning. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty cool. But hopefully I will be wide awake. I will at least sound awake. So hopefully I'll be making sense at the same time. So, but yeah, I'm really stoked about it. So that'll be really good. Now, because it's going to be super, super late tonight. I thought what we could do for spiritual healthcare tomorrow is do something a little bit different. And instead of having spiritual healthcare tomorrow morning, what we're going to do is we're going to have spiritual healthcare in the evening. And I get to bring my co-host. My co-host is going to be co-hosting with me. This co-host is going to be there. So tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Okay, so 7 p.m. Mountain Time, we're going to be doing spiritual healthcare. So there won't be one tomorrow morning. It'll be tomorrow evening. And Galen will be co-hosting with me. We'll see what we're gonna see what happens. So if you're if anybody is like, afraid of snakes, don't tune in for that. But he will be co-hosting, and it should be extremely entertaining, if nothing else. And so mark your calendars, you guys. So it'll be 7 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow evening, and we'll do spiritual healthcare. Galen will be co-hosting, and then so it'll be really good. I'm so looking forward to it. So one of the questions before we get on to the subject of how we can deal with narcissism and how to prevent it, with being victims of it and being victims of these people, as well as how it ties in with the paranormal. One of the questions that I got today, which I thought was great, was, do you think people would look at you funny if you say you don't charge for services, or should you actually be charging? So this is a really huge question, and I wanted to grab it this morning because I've gotten asked this a bunch of times before in classrooms and by investigators who have come in back and forth, and just trying to figure out where the ballpark is with things like charging for investigations. Ethically, it's kind of been frowned upon over years. People just, it's not really accustomed to be charging for investigations. I don't charge for investigations. I just don't. But like where I end up being able to pull in the income and whatever is through things like classrooms, teaching, lectures, live shows, stuff like that, which is a little bit different. But for me personally, it bothers me to be charging charging people who are kind of bottomed out for for help and for information that I think everybody should have access to. I think it's really, I think it's important. I've had a lot of clients come to me over the years who have been to paranormal groups and things like that, and they have been completely ripped off by these people, by certain people and whatever. So it's really difficult. It's a difficult line, and I think we have to be careful about where we kind of draw that line. And Kaz is asking, would you consider donations? Yeah, I think donations is totally fair. I find a lot of the clients that I end up dealing with, a lot of them, because they've often hit rock bottom with certain things. If I end up investing in a client for a long period of time, oftentimes they've already moved 10, 15 times. They've oftentimes they're house poor at that point, or they've been ripped off by somebody else. So it's really tough. But I think donations are totally fair, and whatnot. I think that's totally fair. But yeah, it's really tricky because you're kind of balanced between how far do you go to help certain people, and then you've got your own time and own investment and research and gas and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a fine line, but that's kind of in Kaz is saying donations in my mind tends to be food. Yeah, totally. But yeah, it is. It's a really fine line to walk, and you kind of have to decide, I think, where that line is for you. As I say, for me, my I don't mind, giving this information out to make sure that people have access to it. I think it's super important. I think the worst thing that can happen often is people needing help, and then what prevents them from getting the help is having the wrong job because they can't afford it, or they've been in a terrible situation where they can't get to the help they need, or whatever, and that to me that's not good. But but to be able to pull in some of that income and whatnot from doing things like classrooms and branching into that area of things, it becomes a little bit different, and then I get to still teach, and it's really fun. So that's kind of like where I sit with it. But I mean, everybody's got a different a different game. The only time that I charge for certain investigations is when I'm going way out of town. Say for example, if somebody wants me as a consult in, I don't know, Texas or something like that, then it's like, food accommodations, that kind of thing. That has to be paid for. But in terms of, advice or whatever like that online, or local or whatever, I don't end up charging. So, so there we go. Anyway, to our main topic of conversation here, which I think is really, really key. We've been talking the last number of days about things like narcissism and malignant narcissism, and how deep this stuff can end up going, and it can get pretty intense. And the one thing we haven't touched on yet, because we've been spending so much time talking about them, because we tend to give attention to the squeaky wheel. So and this is where these types of people become an issue, because sometimes what can happen is that their behavior is so obnoxious and is so loud and it's so glaring that we forget to look around us, and sometimes we forget to look at ourselves as well. So it's not such a situation where we want to be, blaming ourselves for it, because God knows that anybody that's been dealing with a narcissist or malignant narcissist or anything like that, they're gonna blame you. Everything is your fault, everything. But it's not really about blame, but we have to begin to take a look and understand the reason why we became a target. So when I'm dealing with clients with haunted homes, for example, with paranormal, the negative entities, or some sort of phenomenon that's not good, the one thing I do immediately is to start to look at the client, not to blame the client, because it's not their fault. They've oftentimes attracted this stuff by default, but to understand exactly why they've come to the spot that they have, what in their experience has caused them to become a target. And when we're dealing with toxic and narcissistic people, we have to be able to do the same thing with them. I like to call it doing an autopsy on the situation, whether the person's out of the situation because sometimes they've removed themselves from it, they just don't know what happened, or they're in a situation where they are still buried in it and they can't understand why it's perpetuating. So when I'm dealing with a client that is dealing with, say for example, a negative haunting in the space, I have to start to do an autopsy of their family, their experiences in life, their past history, all of that kind of thing. And we begin to start to understand where these hallmarkers are, where the traumas are, where the energetic issues are in terms of their self-esteem, their self-worth, how they're presenting themselves in the space and the energy that they're giving off, in order to understand what the entity, why they're resonating on the frequency where the entity is, so that they are perceiving it, but as well as why have they attracted something like this into their experience, where they are being looked at as somebody that can be a target of whatever it is. So with people, we have to do the same thing. What did they see in you that made them go, I can mess with you, I can fool you, or I can manipulate you in some way. And as I say, this isn't about blame, because that implies fault, and we're not talking about fault. But we have to start to look at what did we do early on to make what they did okay? Because if they looked at us and thought, oh man, I couldn't mess with this person, they wouldn't be messing with us. They just don't. They just stay away. There's something that in your experience, in the way you're conducting yourself, in the way you are bringing energy into the room, that is making them see you as somebody that can be pushed around or can be manipulated or bullied or targeted. And we have to really begin to understand what it is. We really do teach with the energy and teach with our actions. Everybody talks a good game, but when it comes down to it, we have to start to examine what it is that we're bringing into our experience and going, hey, wait a minute, is what we are projecting, is that matching up with the things that are coming out of our mouth and what we're saying? And usually when we look around at the people around us, we can kind of get a bead on whether or not that's true, because we really do have people around us that represent bits and pieces of who we are. And if we've got somebody in our experience that's bullying, that's narcissistic, that's abusive, there's some sort of permission that we're giving them to behave the way that they're behaving in our experience, because if we weren't, then we would not be having this problem. It would not be permitted, and they would know. So that's where things like boundaries really have to come in, and we don't have to owe them an explanation, especially people that are very narcissistic, because God knows they don't care what the explanation is anyway. But we don't owe them an explanation in order to move on or change or to remove ourselves from these experiences. But we do have to understand what they look for in us, and what can we display that's going to be different. So let's figure that out. What is it? What can we do differently in order to detract from this? Because let me tell you, the list of things that we can do that involve, removing ourselves, as I say, from the vibrational range of negative entities is very, very similar to what we can do emotionally and physically in order to remove ourselves from toxic people like different types of narcissists and people like that. So one of the things that I find that's been very, very key for this for me from a very early age, because I was very much bullied in school throughout most of my life. So I've been dealing with these people for a very long time. And one of the things that I noticed right away that made a huge difference is to have a defined image of yourself, and not a fake image. We're not talking about a front that you're putting up, but a very unique way of being in the world. Who are you? How are you defining yourself? What does that look like? Are you just trying to blend in with the background? Are you trying to hide? Or do you have a defined image about who you are and what your purpose is? Purpose is just a huge thing. And part of that defined image is, hands down, it is definitely it's purposeful. The other thing that I noticed that was very, very different that brought people to the forefront and brought people away from this type of a manipulative behavior is being able to play really big to the world, being able to ask for what you want, asking big. There was a quote out a while ago that said, "Don't pray a weak prayer." And I thought that was so powerful, because oftentimes we kind of ask for something that we settle for, and that shouldn't be it. We have to be able to play big enough that puts its own energy field out there. Let me tell you, and when we play big, we start to expect different. So when something doesn't line up, we start to feel that right away. The other thing that I've noticed is that the people who succeed really well in places that are, have negative entities, and are trying to move themselves forward from it, is that they know how to accept praise. They know how to get a compliment and take it and internalize it and allow that to boost up who they are. They're not people that turn around and go, oh yeah, okay, I'm, oh, thanks for calling me, pretty or smart, or you giving me a compliment on my work, and then they shy away from it. They accept it and they own it. And I think one of the reasons why this is so important, especially with toxic people, and we talked a little bit about this the other day, where toxic people, when they see somebody deny the compliment, they realize that's a weakness that they can step up, that they can use to step up and step on you and over you. So that's one of a really, really key point, is being able to hear what people are telling you. And if you've got good things that are coming in the door, you have to listen, and accept it and own it. The other thing that I've noticed that has been really, really key to start to avoid this is being able to be in investigatory mode as much as you can. And this isn't about being paranoid. This isn't about being dramatic. But when you get a piece of information from somebody, especially one of these people, is to not be taking it at face value. And that includes insults. That includes put downs. That includes all of those things. But just getting pieces of information and having your brain working on investigation mode all the time. So this is something that with Entity Seeker, I do frequently. If I'm dealing with clients, even when I'm getting pieces of information from a client, I'm kind of in this mode, but I'm also in this mode when I'm dealing with the entity itself. Because as we learned in the Enfield case and different places like that, you can be having sometimes a discussion with one of these entities and they're feeding you information and it's all just bullshit. So you've got to be able to pay attention. You've got to be able to start to look into what people are saying, and you're less likely to get taken and swept off the road into manipulation or into their own agenda. Because that's the thing with a lot of toxic people like this, is that they do have a very strong agenda. If you don't have a plan, you will become a part of their plan. If you don't have a dream or vision, then you are going to become a part of their dream and their vision, and it's usually not very good. So I'm such a big pusher of making sure that when I'm dealing with clients, especially when we're dealing with haunted places, is that they've got a long vision for what's going on. Because when you don't, you can get pulled and swept one side or the other, and then you end up with your fingers in 50 different pies, and you have no focus, and it's really easy for toxic people to start to pull you one way or the other. So having a vision. The other thing that I think is super key is having a nucleus of supporters. So we hear about this in the blue zones, right? Like when one of the Power 9 factors of the blue zones, the happiest places in the world, is that they have support systems and support networks. Steve Harvey and TD Jakes and, all of the people that are, such inspirational speakers and whatnot, everybody tells you is that you never ever talk to small people about your big dreams. Because when you've got a situation where you're trying to explain these certain things or explain your vision to somebody and they are downplaying what you're talking about, right there you've got a big key to go, no, you're not in my circle. This isn't good. So one of the most compelling stories that I ever heard regarding this was from TD Jakes, and he was on an amazing show called Life Class years ago, and he gave a great example where he talked about giraffes and turtles, and he said, I'll never forget it, because he said a giraffe, of course, who's so tall. When they lean down to get a drink of water, when they bow down to get a drink of water, they have to be very, very careful, because the blood will literally rush to their head. And if they keep their head low for too long, they will just pass right out, because it's a giraffe. They're super tall. And what was so interesting was that he used the analogy that the turtle is always reporting his vision from his level of the turtle, right? It's always, because that's where he is. He's just down on the ground. He will never ever understand the vision of the giraffe and what the giraffe can see. He just can't. And it's not because he's wrong necessarily. It's just because that's just not where he is. He is not 20 feet tall. And the giraffe cannot, under any circumstances, bend down too long to talk to the turtle, because if he does, he's done. He's going to pass out. And I think it is so prevalent that we have to understand, don't tell your vision to turtles. Don't do it. Because if you keep your head down there for too long, you're done. You're done. And as I say, it's not because there's something wrong with their vision. It's not at all. It's the fact that if you're a giraffe, you got to have your head up here in order to get anywhere. If you want to move forward, you just got to do it. Marge is saying, be aware and don't react. I analyze so much of what is being said now. Yeah, if there is anything that this time in history is teaching us, that we have to pay attention to the sources and the resources of where information is coming from, whether it be something where, whether it's in the news media, whether it's in, the people around us, whether it's on Facebook, like whatever it is so easy to get wrapped up into, all of this bombardment of information and the propaganda that's coming in. that we have to be able to pay attention and wheedle that out. And propaganda just doesn't come from, politics and Facebook. Propaganda can come in through toxic people around you, and it can be about maybe a family situation or, whatever it is. It can come from a partner, it can come from a spouse, it can come from, propaganda doesn't have to come from, the politics or politicians. And we kind of forget that. So the other thing too is to really understand, I think, ultimately, and this is something we've talked about so much on spiritual healthcare, which is, understanding that the trauma that we end up experiencing, the trauma that we move through, throughout our lives and whatnot, and how we respond to that, how we clean that up, how we own that in and of itself is so damn important to understand what our motivations are. So this one I think is so key. It is, to me, the root of a lot of the situations where people are into toxic occurrences, toxic experiences, whether it be in the paranormal or whether it be in with other people, is when we don't understand our own motivations and why we're doing the things that we're doing, we end up behaving the same way over and over and over again. For example, it could even be a situation where, a lot of kids, a lot of girls, for example, that have grown up without a father figure or fathers or something like that, will get into a relationship where they end up, if they have, trying to please the guy all the time, fearing abandonment, fearing, displeasing, but willing to put up with horrible, bad behavior because because their self-esteem, they haven't healed that wound. They just haven't healed that up. And because they haven't healed that up, they now have toxic relationships with other men in their experience. So it's things like that where we have to understand what is our motivation? Why are we feeling what we're feeling? And that's where doing an autopsy on some of this stuff really comes in handy. Doesn't mean you have to sit there and wallow in it. It's just a matter of going back and just taking a hard look at what can I own in this situation. I don't own their behavior. What they're doing is their business, and if they've been terrible people, then that's up to them. But we have to understand, what is it that made them think that they could do what they did? What is it? And once we can understand that, we can start to avoid it in the future. I have all my clients that are dealing with negative entities always do this, is what is it that made you a target? What is it? What did it see in you that was unhealed, unresolved, still bleeding, that made you put a spotlight on you and said, you're the one, you can be manipulated. There's a number of interesting interviews that I watched a number of years ago with I think it was 4 different pedophiles, and it was very interesting because one of the questions that was asked was, what is it about certain kids that you picked out? And every single one of them had a list of stuff that they looked for. Every one of them. Kids that were lonely, kids that were isolated, kids whose parents were not really around too much, kids who, seemed like the outcast, it was very interesting. They had a very specific list, and all of them had that list. So if we can understand, what is it that we're putting out into the world, then we can start to stop, to put a boundary up, protect ourselves. So it's really important. So I wanted to read you guys a little bit actually from my book, Teaching the Living, today, because there's a bit in here that I wrote about back in the day that I think might pertain to what we're talking about. As an investigator, we have 2 choices: attack and or pursue an energy we cannot see, evict, or physically move with unproven and outdated tactics that often cause a negative or no shift in the activity, or begin to deal with and look at one thing that is ultimately the most obvious constant in the environment: the living people. There is a place where ritual can be an important part of moving forward in a positive way in these situations. We'll talk about that later. Our responsibility as paranormal researchers is to interrupt the pattern the family has going on, because there always is one. On the surface, it seems very obvious, and yet it's not usually how these things play out. And as a result, you end up with a lot of frightened people looking for a band-aid solution in someone who is willing to point at something invisible and blame the circumstances. We know that in everyday life, this is never a good idea. If you're in an abusive relationship, the other person may be responsible for making the noise and the nasty statements. But if you weren't broken in some way emotionally, you wouldn't be still here listening to it. You'd tell them to not let the door hit them on the way out, however that looked for you. We also know that if the person doesn't clean up their hearts and fully understand why they attracted the relationship to begin with, they ultimately attract the same one again in the next individual that they start dating. And it's absolutely 100% true. 100%. So it's something to move in, carry into our day, sit down, grab your journals, do the autopsy, and work it out. Work it out. So that being said, tonight, remember you guys, Coast to Coast AM. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be so much fun, like just ridiculous amounts of fun. And don't forget, tomorrow evening is going to be spiritual healthcare. It will not be tomorrow during the day. It will be 7 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow evening with Galen co-hosting. It will be an adventure. I can guarantee you it will be an adventure. We'll see how long his attention span is. But it should be really fun. So anyway, everybody, gotta do our affirmations to go through the day. So everybody take a breath. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself for who I am. I recognize and am grateful for the abundance that is constantly flowing into my life, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining and tending to my connection with Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. At this moment, all is well. I am able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. I can see and appreciate all the beauty and abundance of life around me. I am able to embrace love while letting go of fear. And I find peace with the soothing silence of my inner being. And everybody take a breath. Thank you guys for an amazing morning. This will be so much fun tomorrow. So tonight, Coast to Coast AM, I will be there talking about teaching the living, spiritual healthcare, and entities and the pandemic and all sorts of crazy stuff. I'll be the second half of the show tonight. You can listen online at coasttocoastam.com, and it will be posted. It will be posted at some point tomorrow, and then tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, guys, Galen will be co-hosting, and we will see where that little adventure takes us. I have no idea what's going on. You guys say thank you so much. Marge, I love you. Oh, I love you too. You guys are amazing. You guys are what makes this happen every day. Like, literally, you guys are it. I can't give you enough love and appreciation and vibes and all of that, because as I say, you guys make this happen. I really mean that. Like, if you guys were not here and doing this and whatever, we wouldn't be doing spiritual healthcare. Like, it wouldn't be happening. So I will see you guys tomorrow with little Galen, and we're just gonna see what happens. All right, so I will see you guys then. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye, everybody.